Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Raise the Vibe with Liz. I'm your host, Liz Peterson, and today I am doing something super fun. I have a wonderful group of strong, powerful women joining me today, and we're doing a panel on psilocybin and psilocybin for healing specifically. I have Jenny Schiltz, Catherine Auman, and Pattie Hanmer joining me today. Let me go over their bios really quick. So Catherine Auman, thank you for joining me again, Catherine. Her experience includes private practice, psychiatric hospitals, chemical dependency treatment centers, residential treatment, and consulting nationally with mental health facilities. Previous director of behavioral health services at Glendale Memorial Hospital, Redlands Community Hospital, and the Alpha Recovery Center. She taught psychology and counseling, is certified master practitioner of Neuro-Linguistic programming, and is currently enrolled in Transpersonal Psychology. Pattie Hanmer joining me again. I've had her on my radio show locally, has been studying healing arts for over 40 years. Her passion and hunger was to understand the wisdom of Indigenous people and the knowledge they carried about plants and healing. She is thrilled to see and sense that the mycelium kingdom is now reaching mainstream healing. So am I. And knowledge that was underground is now spreading its healing arms above ground to reach those people that are ready to lift their vibrational souls. And Jenny Schiltz is joining me again. Thanks for joining me again. Jenny is a quantum shamanic healer and intuitive guide. She works with the body's energy to see where there is dysfunction. This can be trauma, beliefs, programming from this life, past life, inner child, shadow aspects, even things that present as physical issues. She works with the quantum field and unraveling programming, limitations, and beliefs that keep people trapped and looping. Jenny is a big advocate of psilocybin and its ability to shift people in profound ways. Many who use magic mushrooms do so to experience euphoria and see beyond the veil. While this can be beneficial, it is not tapping into the extraordinary ability of this plant medicine to take one deeper into themselves, revealing blocks, limitations, and areas of held density. This plant, when used with reverence and sacred intention, can also assist with unlocking your true nature and your divine path. And I agree. Jenny, Catherine, Pattie, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. So excited to have you all. So let's start right out. So psilocybin for healing. Why don't we go around and share, each of us, what our experience has been and what prompted you to begin the psilocybin use as healing with your clients. Jenny, why don't you start us off since you're at my top left?
Yeah. So, my experience with psilocybin is relatively new. I'd say it's about 4 years. I was introduced to it in a shamanic circle, and I started working with the medicine. And for me, wow, I have been able to dig in and get so much work done in such a short space of time. And it's allowed me to, kind of look at an event, my perception of something, and see a different aspect. And so then when I started connecting in with the guides and what they were saying about it, it's just, they shared so much how this medicine was here to assist us, to break us open, right? To kind of change some of that looping programming that we have and that we're doing everything we can to move out of. And how it also can very easily, just like anything, be abused and not seen as the sacred medicine that it truly is. And whenever we abuse something, we lose the magic of it. And this can go for many, many of the different medicines that are out there. There's something to use it in that ceremonial state. It shifts the medicine, it shifts the people that are partaking, particularly when they start to use that sacred intention and really hone in on what it is that they need.
Beautiful. Catherine, do you want to go next?
Sure. Back in the day, it started because I was a deadhead, and I used to go to our Grateful Dead shows and with my friends and take acid and mushrooms. And people now kind of look down their nose on that as recreational use, which I think is better termed celebratory use. But we were actually using it in a spiritual way because we really would feel like we were worshiping at the shrine of this music that was being downloaded. And I had pure metaphysical experiences at some of those shows. I remember this one time I was just pulsating that God is in the body. You know, this was on psilocybin. It's like, God is in the body. It was just a full body experience rather than a mental idea. And so I was involved in that way. And then I went to, I decided to quit being a waitress and go to graduate school because my undergraduate degree was in English, and like it prepares you to wait tables. So I founded a graduate school called Transpersonal Psychology, which is psychology, which studies mainstream psychology plus all forms of spirituality. And one of the founders of transpersonal psychology was Stan Groff, who had before LSD was made illegal, had been doing research on the healing potentials of LSD and psychotherapy. So we thought that this was perfectly valid thing to study. And, you know, people forget that it goes back that long. It was in the 60s. It was considered very legitimate research, and not psilocybin as much that I'm aware of, but the healing potentials of psychedelics was something that we were studying way back then. And then over the years, before this recent psychedelic renaissance, I would have on my website that I was available for helping people with psychedelic experiences. I would get like one call a year, if that, for people who are interested in that kind of help. And then, of course, since Michael Pollan wrote this book, the phone just gets off the hook with people now. With the psychedelic renaissance that's happening currently, everyone becoming aware of the healing potential of psilocybin, MDMA, LSD, microdosing is actually very wonderful. So in my practice, I've always been open to it, always been interested in it, always found it to be a personal growth area of growth, and am happy to now be able to use that experience to help other people.
Awesome. Pattie?
I really only started my little renaissance here in the US just 2 years ago. I'm doing microdosing. I think that was a result of probably being in the COVID bubble. I'm not a depressed person, but I felt my spirits needed to be lifted. But historically, I'm English, but I missed out on all the deadhead years. Sorry about that, but they just never made it to, they never made it to England, because clearly they had quite a few challenges, you know, going through the customs. But I did go and live in Australia for 20 years, and I lived in New Zealand for 20 years. But my passion then and still is now Indigenous people. So I was blessed to work with the Aborigines in the outback, in the bush. And just watching how they were transcended themselves. And they just have an innate way of just connecting to the stars and the universe. But they did have bush mushrooms at the time there, as well as guana oil and all of these other extraordinary natural plants that were available to help them during ceremony. So I was always intrigued by that. I'm a pretty straight-laced English person, so I never really joined into those, but I witnessed from afar, knowing that my spirit was really intrigued. Then I lived in New Zealand for 5 years, and I was blessed again to work with a lot of the Maori Indigenous people there, and they have an innate way of connecting their spirit, whether it's music or in ceremony was most important. And so I have felt like that has led me to really hold that space for understanding the wisdom of the mushrooms, if it's done in ceremony. And I loved what you said about, yes, you did, you know, it was kind of recreational, but it wasn't, because your spirit was, it had this opening. And so I believe very much in the set and the setting the intention with the medicine, and really creating a sacred space for that sacrament, as I would like to call it, to be brought forward. And so that's really a little bit of my history. And I'm just watching, as you know, you only got one call a year. I bet if you did it now, you'd get a lot more calls. There's probably this real awakening happening, because really with the opioid, that's what's happened with the opioids. I think the whole medical system is really doing a tremendous amount of research to know how this medicine can really help, the plant medicine. So that's my offering.
So true. And I agree. In shamanic ceremony, it takes it to a different level. You know, back in my 20s, I dabbled a little bit recreationally. Catherine, I like how you say in a celebratory way, because it really was. And it did take me to spiritual places. But just recently, another reason why I wanted to do this podcast, I had my own psilocybin journey. It was a very shamanic, therapeutic situation. It was like a 5-hour meditation. I went very deep. I cried for joy that I felt for my life. I healed grief around my mother's death. I now have a deeper understanding of when Deepak Chopra says, you know, time is an illusion. You know, I stepped into that and be like, you know, knowing as a healer, when I do past life work, or, you know, I'm sending distant healing, doing remote healing, I know that time is an illusion, but it just took me to a different sense. And there are so many gifts. It was such a profound experience. And there are different types, you know, of issues that psilocybin can help with: depression, suicide, anxiety, eating disorders, addiction. Cancer patients are, you know, getting over fear of death because of all the research, you know, that they're doing, and the studies that they're doing, you know, psychedelic clinical research and therapy that different programs are doing now, as Michael Pollan, you know, presents in his Netflix series. And I really want to dive into that therapeutic situation. Would one of you like to start off? Let's discuss like this therapeutic situation. It's really what it's offering these people who are suffering from depression and anxiety and those sorts of things. Catherine, you want to start?
Sure. My situation is a little different because I'm a licensed therapist, so I'm allowed to do the legally the work before and after. So I will, one of the things I offer the community is that I do a full assessment for people as a licensed therapist to see whether or not psychedelics are a good idea for a person, because they're not a good idea for everybody. Psychedelics are not for everybody. Some people are not stable enough, and it's going to potentially tip them over the edge. So I do offer, first of all, a psychological assessment screening to see if it's a person, if, in my professional opinion, is stable enough. And, you know, I actually one time had to tell a young woman that I didn't think she was stable enough and I couldn't recommend it. And she was really mad. And she contacted me a year later and she says, I was so mad at you, but you were right. I waited and I can see now that I needed to wait. So, you know, you could kind of risk telling people that this is not a good idea for them. But if you're familiar with the MAP studies, with the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, they've been doing research with psilocybin and MDMA for a number of years, clinical trials legally. And what they recommend is, what their studies are, is a period of like 9 months of therapy, weekly therapy, and then interspersed with 3 MDMA sessions or 3 psilocybin sessions. So this is kind of a model. People often contact me for this type of model because that's what licensed therapy has been doing. So I can provide that licensed therapy, and then these, we'll figure out in the first session, what are you working on? Is it depression? Is it your life's not going well, no meaning in life, whatever, often trauma from childhood. And then those more intense sessions will kind of take, the medicine takes a role in and of itself of what it wants to do, is how we really see it. So we will work with the psychotherapy, with helping the person get stronger in their life, or root out some old issues, or view things differently, or whatever is called for. And then the sessions with the medicine will really, the medicine takes the person deeper into where they want to go. So just recently working with someone who, she contacted me because she didn't really have any experiences from childhood. And as we were talking, I was like, oh, I can see why you would want to forget that. Really, maybe that's a blessing. And in the medicine experience, she was able to remember these things and see why she couldn't remember them and freed up. And, I'm not saying, the problem with the Michael Pollan material is everyone's expecting now an instant cure. And almost all my conversations with new clients is it's not going to be an instant cure. But she was able to move so far in that 4 or 5 hour session of being able to recall these memories in a way that was useful to her and not frightening. So then we pick up again with the therapy. This is a 9-month process, and we continue to work together, and she'll go for another extreme session. And, her boyfriend wants her cured in 9 months. I told her, that's kind of a weird goal, but, you can make a lot of progress in that time. So.
Oh, yeah. And that integration is so important afterwards. And beautiful that there's like therapeutic space being held before and after, a session. Pattie, you also do an onboarding and integration. You want to talk a little bit about your process?
Sure. I really appreciate that, Catherine, because I do work alongside 2 other psychiatrist, a psychologist and a psychiatrist. So I wouldn't just do this myself. I like to have colleagues who are well versed in the importance of what we do an intake. So very, very important that the questionnaire covers everything from their history, mental history, trauma, drama. I too have had people who have wanted to participate in something, but clearly it's not been appropriate. If they've been on antidepressants, it's like, no, come back to me in another year or so, but
Right.
Definitely not now. So I have very strong ethics and very, very clear boundaries. And really, it's also a very intense questionnaire: blood pressure, well-being. Do you have a support system? So I want to make sure that those things are really clear in the initial conversation, and then we can move along to what may happen next. And then so it's a period of time where there's working with if they have a counselor, making sure that the counselor approves of them doing the medicine, and then doing an initial integration if we're doing with a group together, so they know who else is in the group, so that they feel safe. Is it okay if we have men and women in a group together? And then obviously doing the session, and as you say, you can have your intention and set your GPS for what you want, but the medicine will do its own expression, will take you places, even though your intention may be something, the medicine may not deliver that. So just to let people be aware that it's not a Michael Pollan, it's not a Hollywood show. There are things that may arise that you were not expecting, but to be open and willing to go with that journey, because I like to call it a journey, not a trip. I feel like you're a traveler traveling. And then after the session, it's really important that there's time the next day, ideally, that we can have an integration process to understand what came up, what happened, what the takeaway was, and then to have another one even two weeks or 3 weeks later, but also to be available throughout any time if there's anything that comes up that needs to be explored, understood, and tag teaming along with the therapist. So that's how I believe it should be held. I don't know how you feel about that, Catherine or Jenny, but that's wonderful. That's how I like to hold it. And it is a huge responsibility, and it's also it's out of my hands because I feel like the mushrooms are doing their own magic.
Yes, Jenny.
Yeah, so the integration process for me is the key, right? What are the coping skills that a person has in order to move themselves through? And the assessment, just going, okay, what is there? What are you aware of? What are you working through? Because absolutely, there are people that are They're just not stable enough for what can be opened, what can be shown. Particularly, there are people who don't even realize that there's memories underneath there, right? And then those come up and they have to be able to handle it. And I really do like the combination between, having, whether it's a counselor or some sort of support system, because oftentimes people don't have that. So then, part of what I do is provide that integration piece, work with them, connect with them and go, okay, what's next? What do we need to see? Because I like to combine it with a lot of shamanic tools, such as the inner child work or soul retrieval, and the healing of soul fractures. So I don't necessarily see it as a one and done. It's a process, it's a series, and this medicine really just helps you to dig in a way that it's almost as if it helps you to unlayer by connecting you to who you really are. And then from that space, it's like, okay, I can tackle that. I can tackle that dragon in my past. I can tackle this pain. I can do this because it's like, I just remember. It's an alignment that seems to come in for a lot of people. But I think where it can, it's like, I've talked to people who are like, oh yeah, I got some from a friend and we sat and watched a movie and then I was great, but then I cried for the next 2 weeks. Well, yeah, it's because you didn't actually hold space for it to show you what it needed to show you, but the emotion was still there. So it's almost like you connected with it, but you didn't actually do your integration work. You didn't actually use the medicine the way it's designed to be used. And, and I agree with, like Catherine was talking about the concert. You can have a spiritual, experience, even just going and connecting with a tree. So it doesn't always have to be that, eye cover, let me sink completely into myself. But I think it really depends on whether or not the person is just wanting to get high. And there are people that they're like, oh, what's this? I just want to see trails in my hands, or I just want to see this, and it shifts something. It does something to the medicine. It's almost like a dishonoring of it. But when the medicine is honored and there's that support system and the person really views it as a type of therapy, the amount of work that can be done is unbelievable. I was working with someone recently and they were working on the ancestral DNA of autoimmune because it's just down the family line. And so he was taken on a journey and shown the code and shown where it is and what he needs to do and bring into his life so that it ends with him. And it's like, when you think about that, you're like, holy cow. Right? And it's not anyone giving him that information, because sometimes when we receive information from different sources, we can listen to it, we can hear it, but when you receive it from here, from deep within that space, it does something, it shifts something. You're kind of like, okay, I really do I need to do XYZ. And if I can't do XYZ, I need to heal the parts of me that won't let me do the XYZ, right? The sabotage and the things like that. So it's a different type of conversation. It really is. And, when you think about the intake, when you think about the integration after, it truly is this sacred responsibility to be able to assist people through this process, because oftentimes it's like you've got to come into a relationship with the medicine yourself so that you can work with it and the person.
Thank you, Jenny. And a great segue into how do we work with the medicine and what are some of the experiences that your clients are experiencing? Who would like to start? Pattie, you want to start us off?
Sure, I'm happy to. So the medicine itself will do what the medicine does, and everybody will have a completely different experience. That's been my experience with it. And there's no knowing how it's going to work in each individual. So you can have your intention, you can have your input, and it's also the dosages, how much people go for. So it's really important to sit down and work out where the dosage, what dosage works for different people. People have more dense bodies. People have who've experienced doing lots of maybe mushrooms, maybe in the earlier, they have a different capacity to absorb a little bit more. So I think it's also important to know what the dosage, how the dosage will affect different people. And clearly that's going to dictate what kind of experience. You can go from, you know, microdosing up to 5 grams or more, which we call more the heroic journey. I don't know if you other Catherine or Jenny, you know, how you decide what people take, but that is in itself going to have an impact in different people's bodies. So then, you know, once we have the intake and the journey begins, that's when I pray a lot that wherever they are on that journey, that the medicine will work inside them and bring forward whatever it is that they need to know.
Awesome. Catherine?
Well, I just really trust the medicine, and I trust that the right thing's going to happen. And sometimes that's not what the client wants, or sometimes that's a painful experience, or sometimes they're led in directions. I always remember this one guy who was very adamant he was not going to have a spiritual experience. He didn't believe in that. And he's like, fine, he wanted to try it. He'd read Michael Pollan's book. He's just wants to try it, and but he's not a spiritual person that can have. So of course, you know the punchline here. He's like now the most spiritual person you can even imagine. His whole life is devoted to spirituality, just from this one psilocybin experience. So be careful. Be careful what you ask for or whatever. Some people have repressed difficult material come up that they consider that they had a horrible time. And they did have a horrible time. I'm not saying they didn't. But over time of integration and working that through, they usually come to the point where they understand that that was necessary to their growth. I don't want to make it sound like it's always a surprise like that. For the majority of people, it's gentler and reveals itself more gently, but not always. So I always tell everyone, always warn everyone, bad trips are rare, but it's not, we cannot guarantee that's not going to happen to you. Mm-hmm. And, you know, some people, this is one of my issues I get on my soapbox about, is some people say there's no such thing as a bad trip. Well, there is such a thing as a bad trip. And there is such a thing as people being shattered. Psych wards, you know, I worked on inpatient psych wards, and there are people in there who are shattered from taking psychedelic substances. So it's not a big risk, but it is a risk. And that's again why all of us have talked about some pre-screening, because some people shouldn't be doing it. But it's like the reality of bad trips is there. So we want to warn people about that and help them integrate it afterwards. But I have real respect that the medicine has its own intelligence and is going to work in its own way. And I don't always understand that. I have a framework called psychology to fit it into, so it makes sense to me, but that doesn't mean it's true. It's just a framework. And yeah, I just really trust the medicine's own intelligence.
It has an intelligence too that goes beyond the sitting. Right. I had intergenerational trauma pop up and different things pop up weeks later, and still occasionally, you know, have dreams. I actually had someone in a mushroom shirt in my dream last week. So it continues to do its work weeks after, you know, doing the healing process. Jenny, why don't you continue?
I actually just lost my thought. I was thinking about something and then I got lost in your mushroom shirt.
I got a mushroom scarf on.
Yes, that's
all right.
Oh, perfect.
All right.
You know, I had a shaman once say to me that he truly believed that the mushrooms were put on this planet by beings, if you will, that wanted to see our spiritual evolution. and that it was really designed for that. And it's like when I connect in with it, I'm like, there's so much intelligence here. And there is the need to trust the medicine, right? It to really trust that even if someone is shattered, maybe they needed to be. But what they needed is the integration and the support to walk them through that after. I mean, I've definitely had clients come to me after, they've gone to someone else for some type of psychedelic work. I haven't had anybody with psilocybin, but with some of the other substances, and they are completely shattered. I mean, aura is blown wide open. They're, what we refer to as like the spiritual angle and the halo is completely shattered. And they almost exhibit schizophrenic type symptoms at that point. And it's like, you got to kind of patch them back together. And that's always made me very hesitant about psychedelics, right? Because my beginning experience with them was patching people back together. But now it's like the more that I move in this space of going, there's a way that we can do this. There's a way that we can use this really incredible sacred medicine, support people to make sure that even if there is a shatter, it's still to their benefit in the long run, instead of them being kind of left in the wings, if you will, of not being able to have the support that they need to put themselves back together.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people I speak to will actually choose not to do it because of past experience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the recreational use versus clinical use or shamanic use, and the different types that we can do it, microdosing versus that hero dose. Catherine, you want to start off?
Yeah, I think I'm in the minority. I think recreational use is great because I think that people learn also through joy and through expansion and through play and fun and going out in the afternoon, going to the beach and seeing the magnitude of nature in a whole new way, and communing with trees and hanging out with your friends and feeling a heart connection that you don't usually feel. So I think the therapeutic community gets a bit serious at times because the healing potential is so great, and because MAPS decided a long time ago that this was the way that they were going to try to get psychedelics legalized, was by focusing on the clinical aspect and getting them legalized for clinical use, and to downplay the ecstatic elements, because the mainstream culture out there doesn't want people to be too happy or too ecstatic or having too much fun outside the realm of what they want to sell them. So I think the clinical aspect's great, but I don't want to downplay the fact that people getting together with friends or by themselves to explore their own mind, listen to music, have a great time. I know going to raves and with that ecstatic energy, MDMA energy, and just opening your heart and expanding, that is healing. That is a healing experience. We don't always have to be just in these dark rooms talking about our problems to have healing experiences. That's what I do for a living. So, sit in dark rooms with people talking about their pain and stuff. But it's like these other kinds of experiences are also very healing, give us a sense of expansion, more love, more joy. I don't see anything wrong with that.
Pattie?
I love that. I love that. I think, yes. And I think it goes back, as Timothy Leary days, and we've seen a lot of documentaries about that. I think it was Richard Nixon, was that right? Who
Yes.
shut down all of that because people's hearts were open. People were more free thinkers. People could, I don't want to get too hypothetical about it, but it clearly, I felt it was a way where it happened probably here in the US, where people were shut down. So people didn't really, I don't want to get too political about this, but it also felt like there was, there was a way to really put people into a a zone where they didn't really have free thinking, think for themselves.
Definitely.
And consequently, everything from, you know, around the Vietnam War, I was just reading a little bit about that, and people were just so really upset about what was happening. But if you had a free voice, then you were, you know, your voice was kind of stilted. And so I feel like that medicine that was there to open up, it was the renaissance of the heart, and everything was opening up, and all this wonderful kind of spiritual awareness landed here. And then it felt like it's been really suppressed, but I feel like it's opening up again. And I feel like here's an opportunity to rewrite what was struck down, because we need to say what we really what we see, what's going on in the world. I mean, it's really a difficult time. And so to have this medicine to open us up to a different, out of the 3D awareness, and open up to something much larger, where, yes, I just think what ecstasy, you know, can do, but I also know people are in prison for doing that. You know, there's kind of, so anyway, I think that's a huge conversation, sorry, but I feel like that is the quintessential reason why I want to really bring this medicine forward, and other medicines too, because we need to find happiness and joy, and we need to be connected, because we are, I think there's been a lot of shattering. Yeah.
Jenny?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting because when you look at some of the models of how people do this work, there is absolutely the model of, okay, let's build a nest, eye mask, go in deep. There's the cuddle puddles to where you're working in a group, and it really is that heart expansion. There is the group activity of getting outside, connecting with nature. And they all are beneficial. They really are. I think where we can not necessarily get in trouble, but where it can be misused is by not really seeing the sacredness of it. I remember the first time I did ayahuasca, and I'm like connecting in with her, and she looked like the Venus flytrap. And she just said to me, she said, these medicines, these are not for play. These are to assist humanity. And if they are abused, they bite. And I've never forgotten that. And it was really this beautiful understanding that came to me of like, we have these experiences. And yes, we can absolutely learn through play. I mean, there's a group in Costa Rica that before a lot of their journeys, they do ecstatic dance, they do drumming and singing, and they raise the vibration before they then take psilocybin or some other plant medicine, because by raising that and getting into that joy space, it changes how we experience things, right? So there's ways to do it. There's ways so that it doesn't have to be so dark room, clinical, you know, things like that. And really kind of give people that gambit of an experience and see which way do people work best. You know, some need the experience of getting outside and connecting with nature. Some need to get in. Right? Some need that group experience of connecting with others, like, you know, what I call like the cuddle puddle, and connecting their hearts with other people. It can really depend on the person. It can depend on the wounding. It can depend on what it is that's being worked through. You know, and it's interesting because you'll find that the ones that really need the darker room, calm place, really getting inside, are the ones that they've done the other experiences and they haven't been able to get to the core wound within. And so it's time they need to dig in really deep. So, yeah. I mean, that's been my experience. It just varies so much by the person. Almost like different learning styles, right? You know, sometimes some of us are so full of play that we do need to get serious. And some of us are so freaking serious that we really need to play. So it really can depend.
I love that some people are using ecstatic dance to start and really getting the body moving, because I know when I'm working with clients, if I get the body moving or we're in a group situation and I start off with that, or the group that I'm with starts off with that, it really gets the energy flowing. The energy is already moving in the body. The blocks are moving and people free flow way easier, after that physical movement. Pattie, I want to come back to you and talk a little bit about microdosing, because that's one of your areas. So talk a little bit about microdosing and the benefits real quick.
Okay, so I think for anybody who, and mine came out of COVID, and so that's just really been my experience. The other, Catherine and Jenny may have other experiences, but it's so subtle, but it's so, it just soothed the angst that I was feeling, not so much depression, but knowing that we were in a particular significant time historically of having this pandemic. And so I felt like, yes, I can sing, I can dance, I can chant, I can do meditation, I can do all the tools that I have, but it didn't feel kind of enough. And when I started doing the microdosing, I got my, there's many different ways to get it, but I think it's important to know where the source of the mushrooms come from, and the who prepares it, how it's prepared, and having the right kind of efficacy for the tincture. I took it in a tincture, and I think after about a week, I could feel this. It was like a layer dropping away. I didn't have woohoo. It was just ever so gentle. It was like listening to lovely. It was like it was like listening to classical music as opposed to rock and roll, hard rock and roll. I could say that in my system, and people noticed in me that it's like, even in the midst of we're all kind of can't. I felt like I was really operating at a different vibration. And so that then I talked to other friends about it, and they followed what I was doing. And then they reported that they were feeling really much more happier, even though we were in our own little crucibles. We couldn't really go out. They could manage what was happening, and then I passed it on. So I became kind of like the microdosing. People would call me and ask me and say, how do I get this? How can I do it? I didn't really do intakes. It was just from my own experience. But everybody I know who did microdosing, it felt like it didn't have any abject reactions to it. It was very subtle, and it supported everybody. So that was from 2020. That's so. That
Do you feel the same thing after the pandemic?
Pardon?
Do you feel the same effects after the pandemic?
I think I do. Yes, I think I do. I did it for a period of time and stopped. Yeah, I don't do it all the time, because I think it's really important to assess if it's anything, I didn't want to be addicted to it. So I do it for a few months and stop, and then do it again. I've just kind of started again because it's election week. But I feel like it builds on it, but it doesn't mean that you have to have it for the rest of your life. I just felt like it was a great it was like a great homeopath to help me at that time.
Help you through the pandemic.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. I too have heard it helps with anxiety and depression, and people that take the 5 on, 2 off, and there's another way, the Stamets regimen that they recommend for that. And there are no psychedelic effects when you're doing microdosing, just so everybody knows. My own personal experience, I'll add here, I was experiencing anxiety post my mother's passing. It was 3, 4, maybe 5 months after she passed, and I started having anxiety every night when I went to bed. And the microdosing capsules came into my life right at that 3rd day. and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to start it now, 11 a.m. and 11 p.m. It was this target that went in and pinpointed exactly what was causing the anxiety. And I was able to emotionally process through that using the tools, that I've learned over the years in my healing practice. And it was amazing. Now, my body didn't react kindly to taking it. I took it for about 2 weeks and my body's like, maybe not. So, but I keep it in the drawer for targeting situations for myself emotionally, which is, I think, a good resource for my tool bag to have something like if I start having anxiety again, that's something that I will do. Yeah. Jenny, Catherine, go ahead.
Can I just say, I just think it's good to use your intuition on it. There isn't they do give a regulation like 4 days or 3 days or 5-2, whatever regime you're doing. But I've noticed for me, if I just tune into it, I can have it for 1 or 2, 3 days, and then it's okay. It seems like it's just this great panacea for just soothing, calming. And I keep it on my altar. I feel like it's really it calls me when I need it.
It is very intuitive. Jenny, you were going to say?
It's interesting. I'm very similar with the microdosing. I've tried it. People are like, oh, stay on it for this duration, and my body doesn't want that. It really doesn't. So generally, it's just a tool in my tool bag, and I will take it when I'm experiencing unexplainable anxiety or that really uncomfortable feeling in my body to where I'm like, I don't know what this is, but I cannot stand myself right now. And so generally I'll go into it. I'll just connect with the medicine, talk to it and be like, just show me what I'm hiding from myself. Right? Like, what is it that's under there? And you're right. It zeroes it in. And whether it comes in through a dream or it comes in through a thought within that 24-hour period, I'll get it. And I'll be like, okay, now I know how to work with this. Because sometimes there's things that go on that, it just feels so nondescript. And I just need to see it. I just need to see what it is that I'm like blinders on to, because once I see it, then I can work with it,
Right.
And that's what I love, that being a tool. Because I got on SSRIs when I was 18. I didn't get off of them until I was 33. All those years. And and I think about it now, I'm like, this was crazy. And it was interesting. It was like doctor it just script. I never had to go to therapy. I didn't have to do anything to get my Zoloft. And, when I moved from Maryland to Colorado and I got off all pharmaceuticals, the SSRIs were one of the hardest things to beat. And I was on opiates, I was on gabapentin, I was on, all muscle relaxers. Like I was on so much stuff. And the very last one that I was able to get off of and detox was the SSRI.
Wow.
And then I had to learn, because simultaneously while that was going on, I was learning true coping skills, not just block everything out.
Right.
And so for me, I'm very conscious about not doing something to numb myself, not doing something to hide from myself again, because I feel like I hid for so long. So it's perfect. It's perfect. It's that shot, but I did find I had tried doing the 5-2 and my body didn't like it.
Yeah, mine either.
It really
Mine
didn't.
neither.
Yeah. It was too much for me. And it could just be, I am that type of sensitive person, like chemically sensitive.
Same.
And whereas somebody else may not be, right? But, so it's, people they have to listen to their intuition, and maybe they need to play with it a little, right? Like if somebody is deep in a depression, maybe they do need 5 days on and then 2 days off. Maybe they do need that, but that's not how I choose to use the medicine.
Yeah,
I agree.
Go ahead, Pattie. You were going to say something?
Oh, I just really agree with that. I think, there's always people this is how it should be, but I think that's more and more I get more awakened to my own intuition, what feels, around food or around anything. And so it's just that I think that's why the medicines cannot be dictated like pharmaceutical drugs. They're in a whole different category themselves. So this is a whole different relationship that we are working and building with. But I think people are so used to saying, oh, the man in the white coat says I need to take this for so many days, so many weeks, and I'll feel better. This is to me, a whole different way of listening to your own body and not being dictated by somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I really love that you pointed out that we're programmed, used to the people, telling us what we need to do, when, where, and how. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Catherine?
I just finished a month or two ago, being a participant in a 3-month microdosing study, where
wow.
I would fill out daily questionnaires on, do I feel happy? Do I feel like I'm accomplishing my goals in life? How's my energy? Did I microdose or not? Is there anything else? Did I drink alcohol? Anything else that might have affected the microdose and so on, which was very interesting. And you guys aren't going to like this, but I really didn't notice any difference the days that I microdosed and I didn't. And you know what? I think that might be because I'm like really happy in my life. And so I would be like a 10 on happiness every single day. So I feel like I shouldn't even have an opinion because I know most people aren't there. It's not really fair to talk about, because most people aren't in that situation. So if it raises anyone's happiness, I'm all in favor of it. So I would, some days I would take a double hit of a microdose, and then I would feel really high and I'd go, okay, I remember this feeling of feeling really high, but so what? I don't really want to be really high. I don't want to go about my day being really high. And if I was in my 20s, I would love that. Oh, I'm really high. It's like, this is kind of a bother. And day after day, this was really a revelation to me of, first of all, I am aware that my life's really great. I feel very grateful for that. But the microdosing didn't affect it one way or the other. And so I concluded for myself that so the days that I microdosed, it was still a little bit of that kind of exotic, ew, I'm microdosing, And I concluded that even if this turns out to be a panacea, is that the right word? No, what's the word for when it's a placebo? Even if this turns out to be a placebo, that's a good thing. If people are taking something and it's not really working, but it makes them feel like they feel better, isn't that great? Does it actually have to be a chemical thing? No. If people are taking something, it feels like my life's more exotic. I'm more in touch with the spiritual. I'm more in touch with the mystery of the universe. I feel a little bit better. That's great. So I'm convinced, because a lot of my patients will microdose. It doesn't really make any difference for them. I do not share my experience with them. I just say that's great, if it helps or not. They do not notice a difference. And I'm like, I don't know what to say about that. It's your experience. So if it does turn out that microdosing does or does not, because there aren't any studies that actually say it helps. That's not to say that there won't be. I expect that there will be clinical studies that say that it does help. But for the time being, my personal experience is it didn't really make that much difference, other than I thought it was cool. And I think it's cool to be a microdoser. And but on the actual questionnaires, it didn't make a difference one way or the other.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. And I think there are probably other people who've said, nah, I didn't notice a difference. And just on the research, I know that the NIH are now, they're putting a lot of money into psilocybin and smoking, and to help people stop smoking. That there's been incredible upsurge, and there's a lot of money. There's research programs, and I know research programs take 10 years. I mean, they have to, have so many coordinates for it to reach. But I think there's also, I've been reading, all the universities have researchers in London the Imperial College in London, and John Hopkins here, and Arizona University. They're all running programs for psilocybin and ketamine and a lot of other medicines, because, and I think the NHI have announced just recently that they're having the greatest success to help people who stop smoking, because it's the hardest thing for people to do, and they're using psilocybin. So maybe microdosing may be in that research program. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there
So
aren't any of the microdosing studies that I'm aware of, and you're right, there's studies going on everywhere. There isn't anything conclusive.
No, there isn't.
Obviously, there's probably some research I haven't read, obviously.
Yeah,
but of the ones that I'm aware of, there is no conclusive evidence that microdosing helps one way or the other, or doesn't help. So more will be revealed. And
well, it's science and spirituality, that's where I feel like using that own inner wisdom. If you know it works for you, then by all means take it. If it doesn't work for you, don't. Yeah.
Yes. If you're having anxiety and you want a targeted approach, maybe, microdosing for a day or two will help you uncover, what needs to be revealed, and then leave it at that. Yeah.
Probably better than a glass of wine.
Although there's nothing wrong with a glass of wine.
Well, I agree.
Well, that's usually to cover it up, right?
Yes. The Band-Aid.
To enjoy.
Oh gosh. I've heard studies with PTSD, have been great with psilocybin research, that they're really making strides. What's that?
It's mostly MDMA.
Oh, okay.
The MDMA with veterans has been, they're probably gonna, getting very close to legalizing because of the MDMA studies with veterans and PTSD.
Awesome.
So MAPS is in their 3rd stage clinical trials, and it's looking good.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's actually on the ballot right now.
Right.
In Colorado, it's they're trying to legalize the MDMA and the psilocybin with licensed facilitators in whatever they deem to be the proper setting. And so it'll be interesting, because they are seeing it. I mean, they are seeing the effects of this stuff with the veterans and how it's helping with the PTSD. And it's like I'm kind of watching everything, and I'm kind of going, I wonder what this is going to take on. Is this going to be? I think it could be a really great thing, and then I can also see where we can over government it, and take some of the ceremony out of it. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic, that blend between spirit and medicine, like the Western and the Eastern. It's like, what is this going to look like? But I think it's encouraging that the conversations are happening, that there's things like this on the ballot, whether it passes or not. It's still really encouraging that we are starting to shift into this.
And let's talk about the ballots, because it is decriminalized in several states now, psilocybin, but not legal. So there's a difference there. Let's talk about that. Jenny, you want to start off, or Catherine? Go ahead.
Well, the difference is that you can still be prosecuted, but the likelihood of it is practically zero. So you have to be aware that, for example, marijuana is still not legally federally. So even if your state says even if your state has legalized it, it's still federally not legal. So all of these things really have to do with whether or not law enforcement is behind it or not. And most law enforcement, it appears to me, is not in favor of these victimless crimes, at least here in California. They don't really want to spend their time prosecuting people for using psychedelics in their own home, or I think giving it to school children, or flying enormous amounts of quantities over the border or something. These are crimes that they're going to be interested in, but I really think that they've lost interest in prosecuting people for exploring their own minds. And, so it's still illegal, underground work is still illegal. It's going on all over the place. And we do have to keep in mind that it's illegal underground work, but the probability of being prosecuted for it is very slim. And that's what decrim means. It's decriminalization. People are constantly telling me, oh, it's legal in Oakland. It's like, no, it's not. It's been decriminalized. Oh, it's legal in Colorado. No, it's not. It's been decriminalized. And that is it's a legal distinction. I'm not a lawyer, but it's a distinction and it's still illegal. It just means that your likelihood of being prosecuted is zero, just about zero. That doesn't mean that you couldn't get some super reactionary mayor of your city and says, go out and arrest everybody. Or there could be some kind of, I don't want to get in paranoid land here, but some sort of military takeover and they start prosecuting everybody who's doing drugs. These are very unlikely scenarios, but it is illegal. I let all my patients know we are talking about illegal things. The likelihood of you getting caught or anything is very slim, but you do have to know you are breaking the law. We are not advocating anyone breaking the law. We have disclaimers. My husband and I give public talks on psychedelic therapy, MDMA therapy for couples, microdosing. We give these public talks. We always have a disclaimer at the beginning that says, we are not advocating anyone break any laws. Please do this in countries other than ours, because we're not advocating breaking the law. We're not advocating illegal use, but we are in favor of people's having the freedom to explore their own minds. Just like this talk here, I'm sure none of us are advocating anyone break any laws. We're just saying that these are potentially very beneficial, and it's up to you to decide what you want to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pattie,
I think the word decriminalized, I think I might put deprioritized.
That's good. I like that.
That's not on the top. But one piece for this, which I would wonder, is how the pharmaceutical companies are going to address this, and
they're
how
trying to get into it as fast as they can.
That would be a concern that I have. That then it could be, then it can not be deprioritized. It could be criminalized because they'll want to, have their big paws on it and regulate it.
That's already happening.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's happening already.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how they're going to do that. And I think it's also, correct me if I'm wrong, Jenny, but if you grow it and take it yourself, that's acceptable.
Not where I'm at.
Yeah.
Okay.
My understanding is like in Denver, and as far as like Colorado, it is only decriminalized in the city of Denver.
Right.
In the city. Okay. All right.
So, I mean, in like that, so it's kind of interesting when you watch that. You're like, well, what does that mean? Just like it's decriminalized in the city of DC, but any of the surrounding areas, yeah, absolutely, you could be prosecuted. What they had on the ballot to be this voting on for today would allow, when you really, because I contacted the lady who was helping to put that together with the panel and got the bill, and it does allow for home growing a certain amount. And what's really neat about that one is they do like to pair that with a counselor or a psychiatrist to assist the process, but that if somebody is deemed that doing this medicine is going to assist them with their anxiety, depression, PTSD, and they actually include in their terminal illnesses. So I really like that, because there's some hospice work that can be done.
Awesome.
There can be written in there that you can grow a certain amount.
Right. Okay.
Go Colorado.
We'll see if it passes. I mean, Colorado is very, it's considered a blue state because of Denver, but everywhere else is very red. And
Yes.
so it
Catherine,
is,
what do
you know, I mean, I'm surrounded by 5 military bases. So,
Mm.
I mean, it is
Yeah, we have a
definitely,
big one here too
yeah, like it is.
in Washington.
Mhm.
Catherine, what is California? Is it just sections of California or the whole of California?
Well, we have cannabis is legal, but I believe it's only Oakland.
Interesting.
I believe
Pattie,
it's
do you know
only
what it is
Oakland.
here in
I
Washington?
know, I know King County is, Vashon's not, but it's just King County. So that's the
So
Seattle
Seattle proper.
metropolitan area. Anything outside that, it's not.
What
So.
is in King County?
King County is Seattle, which is funny
Oh, I
because
know, but
Vashon is
what
considered
is it?
King County.
Decrim?
Yeah,
King
Yes.
County is
decriminalized.
decriminalized? What's
Yes.
decriminalized? What?
Well, psilocybin.
Psilocybin? Okay,
Yeah.
good to know. That's my hometown.
Oh, okay. And then there's ketamine clinics kind of starting up everywhere.
Yeah, we
So
have those all over here.
Yeah, and I was just on the freeway driving down, there's huge, great billboards with ketamine in Tacoma, big billboards advertising ketamine. So I know that's important for PTSD as well. So that's a whole different kind of medicine. It's not a plant medicine as such, although everything comes from plants, doesn't it?
Yeah. All right, so let's segue into consciousness because we've all grazed around consciousness and discovering the mind. So who would like to start off? Jenny, do you want to start with that?
I think it's interesting. I love the fact, Catherine, you were talking about the person you were working with who was like, do not want a spiritual experience and got one anyway. And the spiritual experiences can truly vary. You know, whether it's the connection with a tree. I mean, when you fully connect in with something that, you know, it's like you knew it was alive, but did you see the consciousness within it? When you connect with that shifts something, it opens something. It really kind of changes your entire worldview. You know, I've seen where people have connected in with God, you know, whatever their version of God is. A lot of people, I find more, you know, a good grouping, and I tend to work with more of that spiritual side, right? And so a lot of them are able to connect in with their own innate intelligence. And from there, that shifts them. So it's not so much connecting to something out there, it's connecting into this alignment here. And it does seem to assist with that.
Awesome. Catherine?
I'm not clear on the question.
Consciousness and discovery of the mind. That's what we're talking about. That ability to explore consciousness.
I think that like Jenny was saying, that these substances show you the consciousness in everything. And we live in a reductionist culture, scientific culture, that wants to tell you that things have no consciousness, nothing has consciousness. Consciousness just comes from the brain. And this is the antithesis to that. It's like I can remember once when I was tripping on LSD in Venice Beach, and I kicked this trash can, and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I was really sorry that it hurt this trash can." And I turned around, these people were all going, "What?" But I was really aware of the consciousness, you know, that I had injured this. And that's like a silly example, but that expanded consciousness of being able to feel oneness, of feeling like you are me, of I'm sorry for my ignorance, and accepting everyone's level of consciousness, everyone's consciousness of plants and animals and the universe, and that there's a higher intelligence. These experiences are not what everyone has, but this is the potential. And these are life-changing realizations, and for the better, for I think everyone involved to have these kinds of experiences opens the heart, makes one more potentially more compassionate. And I think there's some famous quote, I don't remember what it was, but somebody was saying, if you're not using these drugs to help you become a better person, what are you doing? And it's like they do have this inherent ability to open our hearts, and we become better people just by that, just by accepting that. I was just in Europe for 3 weeks, and being around all that ancient, you're around buildings that were built in 1000, 1200, and you get a much better, I experience this every time I go to Europe. It's like you get a much better sense of yourself as a small, not very important little piece. You're your own little piece of life, but you're not really that important. In America, we think we're super important. We don't have any sort of relevance with history or the past. We just think, I'm so important. My life's so important. What I want to do. I think psychedelics are one potential to be able to get a right-sized sense of ourself, of like, yes, I have my own importance, but it's really infinitesimal, and that's okay. That's fine. I'm happy just making my own small contribution to life and then going on somewhere else. I think that this is one of the great potentials for consciousness with psychedelic drugs, is getting a right-sized sense of myself in the cosmos. This is very healing for people, very beneficial. And it counteracts this materialism and super emphasis on the ego and the persona that mainstream society is telling us is all that's important.
Well said. Pattie?
I think I'd call it the great equalizer, really, when you think about, because it helps drop away some of the ego in there. And I don't want to get too much on a high horse, but I feel like we are all in this collective consciousness when we're doing the journeys together. I feel like it's, as I call it, the great equalizer. There's been such movement, I think, and such understanding, great lunar eclipse going on. I don't want to get too woo-woo, but there's definitely something that's lifting us out of this way where we're acting, behaving, where there's, it feels like there is such inequality going on. I feel like these underground mycelium is trying to connect us all on a different wavelength, that we're really are going to help feed one another, just like the trees do, just like we're beginning to understand, without having all the hope, despair, hate, anger. It's love, peace, and pixie dust to some degree, but I'd like to think it's helping us some way consciously, that where we are is, and it's like Catherine says, we really have to look inside ourselves and to know that it's what's happening here is not really the truth. There is a lot more truth to be seen, and I think the mushrooms are, they're bringing us something, as along a lot of the plant kingdom is a lot more wisdom. We have been pretty under a dark umbrella, like the mushrooms. It's like there's an opening that's going to happen for us. So I feel like a mushroom, sometimes I always think about the lion's mane. It looks like a brain. And I think lion's brain is the lions, if people don't do psilocybin, they're taking lion's mane mushrooms or reishi mushrooms. Those mushrooms have a lot to offer, even if it's not hallucinogenic. It's definitely helping the nervous system. So I great reverence to the mushroom, because I believe it's like our brains look like a mushroom a little bit, and we need to just know that there is something much more that's being gifted to us consciously. Sorry, I'm not being very articulate about that, but sometimes there's no words for the mushrooms. They're just doing their work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a remembrance that, being part of the all, that mycelium network is just a tiny fractal of the whole, right? Feeding the underground, which feeds the trees, and the trees give us oxygen, we give them, so that it's a cycle. We are part of the plant kingdom, part of the planet, part of the functioning of the whole world, that oneness consciousness, and bringing us back to that, I think, is very important. And like you said, Patty, the other mushrooms that aren't, I take mushrooms every day for immune benefits, memory, and all sorts of things. They have a lot of benefits, psychedelic or not.
Yeah.
And we're coming down to the end of our show. So I want to invite each of you to share anything that you would like to end with, a little jewel of wisdom or anything before we go. Jenny, would you like to start us off?
Well, I actually kind of want to talk to something that Catherine just said, where she was talking about how it can help someone kind of get out of their own head and realize, like, we're okay here, right? But like, it's, definitely that American thing of like, I'm so important and everything I do is important and I have to control everything. But I've also seen the flip side. I've seen the ones that are so empathic, and it's almost, like working with the people who don't feel like they have a right to breathe, right? Like they don't understand the world. They're constantly feeling, assaulted by it. And it's like the mushrooms come in and the psilocybin takes over, and all of a sudden they're going, I'm okay. And it's gonna all be all right. I don't need to understand all of this, but I know I belong here. And it's not in that inflated sense of belonging. It's that sense of, I'm good and I deserve to be here and I deserve to be happy and I deserve to have a good life and connect with people and help people and do all of these things. So it's really interesting because I can see absolutely both sides of it. It just depends on which aspect of the ego is what's really dominant in the person and needing healed, So, it's really been a beautiful experience. I have adult children who have done this medicine, and watching them blossom with it has been an interesting thing. And, and even though, they've only been able to do it a couple times because they've all got little babies. But just watching that experience with them, watching that shift and just knowing like, wow, if I had been able to connect in my 20s, what would life have been like? What could have shifted, So for me, it's such a sacred, absolutely beautiful gift. It's an absolute gift.
Thank you, Jenny. Catherine?
That's beautiful. I guess I'd just like to emphasize that we said earlier, psychedelics are not for everyone. And if you find they're not for you, or you're find yourself a little fearful, I just want to share that for me, I could tell that I wasn't, I grew up in a difficult family, like a lot of people. And I could tell that I wasn't really ready when I was younger. And I waited until I was a little more mature to do psychedelics. I think that's a really good idea. It might not be the right time for you, might not ever be the right time for you, but if you want to wait, that's fine. There are many other ways of healing. As Jenny and Patty have both been saying, and Liz as well, this is one tool in a toolbox of personal and spiritual growth. It's a very powerful one. It's very popular right now. I've seen healing trends come and go, and this is the one that's really hot right now. But if it's not your calling, there are many wonderful ways to work on yourself: psychotherapy, shamanic healing, dance. There's ecstatic dance. There's a lot of technologies that have been developed over the years to induce psychedelic states. I give a talk on psychedelic states that come through sex and without using drugs, and drumming and meditation, and all these different kinds of ways to get this feelings of oneness, higher consciousness that we are seeking, a sense of right-sized in the universe. So if psilocybin's calling to you, great. It's a wonderful tool. Be careful. But there are also lots of other wonderful ways to explore the mystery.
Thank you, Catherine. Patty?
I just have a little poem, Havis, I thought I'd wrap up with. It's just like, I wish I could show you when you are lonely, when you are in darkness, the astonishing light of your own being.
Oh,
I think that's what the mushrooms can help us with. And yeah, I do feel like maybe it is trending a little bit, but I'm happy being on the trend. If this gets people out of where they're at, something else may come in. I don't know. The Pleiades may arrive, but right now this is what we have, and I'm grateful for it.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Patty. And thank you everyone for joining me. Jenny, Catherine, Patty, this has been great. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your wisdom. I really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you so much. And
Thank
I know my
you.
listeners are thanking you too.
Wonderful to
Thanks
meet
for the
you.
work that you do, Liz, and doing these shows. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice to meet
Thank
you
you,
both.
Jenny. Yeah,
Thank
nice
you.
to meet you both as well.
Okay.
Thanks,
you.
everyone. And thank you, everyone, for joining me. My name is Liz Peterson, and this is Raise the Vibe with Liz. And remember to get out there and raise the vibe. Thanks, everyone.